Year's Eve with a Shifter Fox by Melina North. Chapter 1. On the night of New Year's Eve, Clara sat curled up on the couch in her cozy, oversized pajamas. The glow of the fireplace flickered against the walls of her quiet living room. Outside, snow gently fell, casting a serene hush over everything. The clock ticked down to midnight, and though she felt a touch of loneliness, Clara smiled to herself. She had promised herself this year would be different. She would embrace the moment, savor the little things, and let go of all the stress and worry that had weighed her down. The doorbell rang, startling her from her thoughts. It was strange. She hadn't expected anyone, especially not this late. As she approached the door, her heart skipped a beat when she saw the large, beautifully wrapped box sitting on the doorstep. No card, no name, just the box, beckoning her to open it. Curious, she pulled it inside and carefully untied the ribbon, peeling back the layers of wrapping paper. As the box opened, Clara gasped in shock. Inside, crammed into the space, was a massive cage. But it wasn't the cage that took her breath away. It was the creature inside, a towering figure, a man with long, fiery red hair and a sharp, ferocious gaze. He had the body of a powerful fox, all sleek muscle and fur, his form shifting between human and animal features in a mesmerizing, fluid motion. His fox ears twitched, and a long, luxurious tail swished behind him, nearly knocking the edge of the cage. He was unlike anything she'd ever seen, a wild, untamed being, both intimidating and utterly captivating. The man grinned at her, his eyes twinkling with mischief. His voice was deep and smooth, teasing her immediately. "Well, well, it seems like I've found the right place," he said, his tone confident and playful. "I know I look a bit intimidating, but don't worry, sweetheart. I'm here for you, to enjoy the night with you, for your pleasure." Clara stood frozen for a moment, unsure if she should be frightened or intrigued. The man, or fox shifter, seemed so larger than life, and yet there was a warmth to him, a promise of something more. He stretched his long limbs, his muscles rippling beneath the fur, as he eyed her with a challenging yet flirtatious smirk. "What do you say? Let me out of this cage and we'll make your New Year's Eve unforgettable." She took a hesitant step closer, feeling a mix of fear and excitement. "You're a fox, a shifter?" she asked, her voice wavering. He chuckled, the sound like a low growl in his chest. "That's right, a shifter fox. But I promise, I'm far more than just my wild side. I can be exactly what you need tonight. Whatever you desire, I can give it to you. Just relax and let me show you." His words were a smooth invitation, and Clara felt a strange heat rise in her. The shift between fear and intrigue blurred, leaving a potent pull between them that she couldn't deny. Slowly, she unlocked the cage, the sound of the mechanism clicking loudly in the otherwise still room. The man stepped out, towering over her, his presence overwhelming yet strangely comforting. "I won't bite," he teased, his voice rich with a promise she wasn't sure if she should trust, but wanted to. His intense gaze never left hers as he closed the distance between them, his large form now towering above her. He was a giant, his body rippling with raw power, and yet his playful smirk never faltered. Clara swallowed, her heartbeat racing. What do you want from me?" His grin widened, and with a teasing glint in his eye, he lowered his voice to a whisper. "All I want is for you to enjoy yourself. Forget the world outside. Forget the worries, the doubts, the stresses of the year. Tonight is for you and me." His tail flicked lazily, brushing against her leg. "So, why don't you let go and let me help you with that?" A shiver ran through Clara at the intensity of his gaze. for a moment longer. But then, with a deep breath, she gave in to the strange magic of the moment. The room seemed to shrink, leaving only the two of them in this carved space where anything could happen. As the clock struck midnight, Clara realized that maybe this was the new beginning she had been waiting for. A night of thrilling, mysterious pleasures, something she never expected but couldn't resist. The year was starting with an unforgettable bang, and she would let it unfold, wild and untamed, just like the fox shifter who had just entered her life. Chapter 2. As the evening went by, Clara found herself settled back onto the couch with a bowl of popcorn in her lap, the flickering light of the fireplace casting shadows on the walls. She was still processing the surreal events of the night, but there was something about the fox shifter's presence that made her feel safe, yet excited. His towering form loomed beside her, his energy filling the room, but he seemed to be content in simply watching her, his large tail swaying lazily. "So," Clara said, trying to ease the tension with a small smile, "I thought we could watch something festive. It's New Year's Eve, after all." Without waiting for his response, she picked up the remote and navigated to How the Grinch Stole Christmas, a classic Christmas movie that always brought her comfort. As the film began, the opening scene played with the Grinch grumbling in his cave, his green face twisted in a mischievous sneer. The shifter beside her shifted, a low, rumbling chuckle vibrating through his chest. "Is that supposed to be the Grinch? I'm more the type who steals hearts, not presents." He leaned in, his breath warm against her ear as he whispered, "But if I were in his place, I'd take more than just the Christmas trees, if you know what I mean." Clara bit her lip, trying to suppress a laugh, her pulse quickening from his proximity. His playful tone was clearly a teasing prelude to something more, but he wasn't done. "You see," he continued, his voice dropping to a velvety, almost dangerous purr, "the Grinch has no idea how to have real fun. If I were him, I'd have wrapped up more than just presents for Whoville." His gaze lingered on her, his eyes glowing with mischievous intent. "I think he'd need a good lesson on what really gets someone in the holiday spirit." Clara shifted uncomfortably, trying to focus on the movie, but the intensity of his gaze made it almost impossible. The Grinch's antics on screen seemed like mere background noise to the flirtatious energy he was exuding. His muscular body, pressed casually against the arm of the couch, radiated heat, and Clara couldn't help but notice the way his broad shoulders seemed to fill the space. As the Grinch tried to sneak his way into the Whoville homes, the fox shifter nudged her playfully with his elbow. "You know, I could do that way better. No one would catch me. I'd be too fast, too smooth." He leaned closer, his lips almost brushing her ear as he added with a grin, "But instead of stealing Christmas, I'd steal your heart." Clara's breath caught at the teasing words, a flush creeping up her neck. She forced herself to focus on the screen, but his voice lingered in her mind. The Grinch's plans to ruin Christmas were nothing compared to the way this man, this shifter, was slowly wrapping her in a cocoon of heat and desire. Every word, every playful comment felt like a spark, making it harder to resist the allure of his presence. As the movie continued, the Grinch's heart grew 3 sizes, but the fox shifter seemed to have an effect on Clara's heart in an entirely different way. She was no longer watching a movie. She was feeling the weight of his gaze, the teasing touch of his words, the electric tension that lingered in the air. "Bet you couldn't handle me," he teased, his voice husky, each syllable dripping with spice. "Not like this. Not when I get under your skin. I'd have you begging for more, and you wouldn't even know what hit you." Her breath hitched, and for a moment, the world outside the house, the ticking of the clock, even the film on the screen, all faded into the background. All that was as if the Grinch's heart wasn't the only one that was growing. So was the undeniable pull between her and the shifter beside her. Clara finally turned to him, her voice low and playful despite the racing of her heart. "You think you could do better than the Grinch?" He met her gaze, his eyes darkening with a mix of amusement and hunger. "Oh, I know I could," he said, the smile on his lips suggesting that he was more than willing to prove it. With that, the teasing, the tension, and the night itself seemed to stretch on forever, but Clara knew that she wouldn't be able to resist him for long. The Grinch might have stolen Christmas, but the Foxman had already stolen her attention, and, as the evening wore on, he was making it very clear that he intended to take much, much more. Chapter 3. Clara shifted. Her curiosity piqued despite the growing heat between them. The air seemed to vibrate with the intensity of his presence, and it was becoming harder to ignore the fire that sparked in her chest every time their eyes met. She had to know more about this wild, enigmatic creature beside her. After all, how could someone like him possibly exist? With a playful smirk, she turned toward him, her voice light but full of intrigue. "So, what's your name anyway? How does someone like you even exist?" His grin widened, the glint in his eyes mischievous and a little wicked. He seemed to enjoy the way she was trying to piece together the puzzle of his existence, but he was in no rush to give her the answers she craved. "My name," he echoed, leaning back into the couch as if he owned it, his muscular form relaxed, yet exuding an undeniable dominance. "Well, sweetheart, I suppose you can call me Riker, but names are so formal, don't you think?" His gaze lowered to her lips, his voice dipping to a husky whisper. "You can just call me whatever you like. I'm here for your pleasure, after all." Clara swallowed, trying to focus on his words as the heat in her cheeks deepened. His teasing tone was infectious, drawing her into his web more with each passing moment. "And as for how I exist," he continued, his eyes never leaving hers, "let's just say I'm a bit rare. Not something you'd find in your typical corner store, or even in your average fantasy novel." He chuckled softly, his tail swishing lazily behind him, a slow, sensual movement that seemed to reflect his every thought. "I'm a shifter, a fox, born from magic and desire. There's a little more to me than meets the eye. I'm not here by chance. I'm here because you need me, whether you realize it or not." He leaned in closer, his breath warm against her ear as he whispered, "And I can feel it, darling. You want to know more. You're fascinated, drawn to the unknown, and to me." His lips brushed just below her ear, sending a shiver down her spine. "But don't worry. I'll make sure you enjoy the discovery." Clara's breath hitched at his proximity, at the sultry edge in his voice. The way he teased her, so confident, so aware of the effect he was having, made it hard to think straight. She wanted to ask more, to dig deeper into the mystery of this creature, but the pull between them was so intoxicating that she couldn't bring herself to care about anything but the here and now. He grinned, reading the thoughts flickering across her face. "You're thinking about it, aren't you? How someone like me could possibly exist? Well, let's just say that not everything needs an explanation. Some things are meant to be felt." His fingers brushed her arm lightly, sending a jolt of warmth through her skin. "But don't worry, sweetheart. I'll take good care of you tonight. No explanations needed." Clara's heart raced, and for the first time that evening, she couldn't decide if she wanted to push him away or pull him closer. His presence was overwhelming, his teasing words like a game she was both eager and hesitant to play. Riker's gaze softened, but his smirk never faltered. He could feel the tension radiating off her, the magnetic pull between them, and he was more than willing to let her unravel at her own pace. "Relax," he said softly, his voice almost soothing. "I'm not going anywhere, but tonight you'll let me show you exactly how someone like me can exist." The movie played on in the background, but neither of them were paying attention to it anymore. It was clear that the only thing Clara was watching now was Riker. His every movement, his every word, and the way he had her completely captivated, despite the playful teasing and the dangerous, tantalizing edge that never left his demeanor. Chapter 4. Clara stood abruptly, feeling a sudden wave of nervous energy flood through her. Her heartbeat had quickened, and the heat of Riker's presence was becoming overwhelming. She needed space, needed to think, to regain control. Without saying a word, she quickly moved toward the kitchen, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the coffee machine. The cool air in the kitchen did little to calm the heat that had taken over her body. She turned the machine on, trying to focus on the rhythmic whir of the water heating up. Anything to distract her from the magnetic tension she felt, pulling her back to Riker. But as she poured the coffee grounds into the filter, she felt it, the sensation of him behind her, his presence like a weight that made the air thick. Before she could react, Riker was there, his strong hand resting on the counter beside her, his body towering just inches from hers. "You're running away." His voice was low, teasing, but with an edge that sent a thrill through her. "I thought we were just starting to have fun." Clara's breath hitched, her pulse racing as she turned, only to find herself pressed against the wall by Riker's massive form. His eyes gleamed with playful yet predatory intent, his gaze locked onto hers as he leaned in, his lips brushing just above her ear. "Did you think you could escape?" His voice was husky, dripping with that same teasing, spicy edge that made her heart race. "You can't run from me, sweetheart. You're mine tonight, and I intend to enjoy every moment of it." The warmth of his breath sent a shiver down her spine, and she instinctively tried to pull back, but his arm caged her in, pinning her to the wall with an effortless strength. His scent, a mix of musk and something wild, flooded her senses, making her dizzy. "Why are you nervous?" he murmured, his voice a seductive growl as he pressed closer. "You've got nothing to fear from me. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to make you feel." His lips hovered just above hers, his breath mingling with hers, and the room seemed to shrink around them. Her heart raced, unsure if she should push him away or pull him closer, torn between the overwhelming desire to give in and the lingering hesitation. He tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her pulse flutter. "Go ahead," he whispered, his lips brushing her cheek. "Push me away if you want, but don't think I'll leave you alone, not until you're begging for more." Clara felt the heat in her body surge, her mind spinning with the intoxicating mix of fear, excitement, and longing. She was trapped, her body pressed against the wall, his proximity making it impossible to escape. But in that moment, she didn't want to escape. She wanted to give in, to feel everything he was offering, even if it was too much, even if it was dangerous. The tension between them was electric, and Clara felt herself teetering on the edge of something she couldn't name. Riker's teasing had pulled her in, his every touch, every whisper, pushing her further into the storm of desire that she couldn't seem to escape. "You can't resist me," he murmured, his lips just a breath away from hers now. "I can feel it, sweetheart. You want this, and I'm not going anywhere. So relax. Let me show you what it means to truly feel." The words hung in the air like a promise, a challenge. And in that moment, Clara knew she could no longer fight the pull between them. Chapter 5. Clara's heart pounded in her chest, her breath coming in shallow gasps as Riker's body pressed even closer, his overwhelming size filling her senses. She could feel the strength in him, the power that radiated off his every movement, and it sent a rush of fear through her. She had never been so close to someone. No, something so big, so imposing. His towering frame, the muscular build beneath his fur, the way his mere presence seemed to dominate the room. It was all too much. She wasn't sure if she was trembling from excitement or fear, or a combination of both. Her pulse quickened as she looked up at him, her body pressed tightly against the wall with nowhere to go. She felt small, vulnerable, and the realization sent a wave of uncertainty through her. She had asked for this, had been drawn to him, but now, as she felt the full weight of his body just inches from hers, she found herself unsure. He was so big, so intimidating, that it made her hesitate. I don't know if I can... Clara started, her voice shaky. Her words got caught in her throat, her head spinning with conflicting emotions. Her gaze flitted between his intense, glowing eyes and the imposing shape of his form. Riker noticed her hesitation instantly. His expression softened just slightly, though his teasing smirk never quite left his lips. His tone shifted, becoming more gentle, as though he could sense the mix of fear and desire swirling within her. "Hey," he murmured, his voice like velvet, his breath warm against her skin. "I can see you're nervous. You're not used to this, are you?" His large hand cupped her cheek with surprising tenderness, his thumb gently tracing the line of her jaw. "It's okay to be a little scared. I'm a lot to take in, but I promise, I'm not going to hurt you." He leaned closer, his body nearly pressing her into the wall, but this time his movements were slower, more deliberate. His lips hovered just above hers, but he didn't rush to kiss her, giving her the space to breathe, to process. "I'm not like the other men you've known," he said softly, his voice full of confidence, but also a trace of something tender. "I might be big, everywhere, but that just means I can give you more, in ways you've never imagined." Clara swallowed, her chest tightening as she struggled to calm the frantic beat of her heart. She was trapped between wanting him, needing him, and the fear that came with the overwhelming size of his presence. But something about the way he spoke, his gentle touch despite his strength, made her feel like she could trust him, at least for tonight. She looked up into his eyes, searching for any sign that he saw her as more than just someone to tease, someone to dominate. What if I can't handle it?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, the vulnerability in her words raw and honest. Riker's lips curled into a smile, but it was softer now, more reassuring. "You're stronger than you think," he whispered back, his hand moving from her cheek to the curve of her waist, his fingers brushing the fabric of her pajamas. "I'm not here to overpower you, sweetheart. I'm here to make you feel safe, to make you feel good, in every way possible." His gaze softened even further, his smirk fading into something more tender. "It's okay to be afraid," he said, his lips brushing her ear as he spoke, sending a shiver down her spine. "But remember, fear can be exciting, and tonight, I'm here to show you just how much you can handle." Clara took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Despite the size of him, despite the fear that still gripped her, there was a flicker of something inside her, a need, a desire that couldn't be ignored. Riker was right. She didn't have to let fear control her. She had the power to decide how far she wanted to go, and for the first time in a long while, she felt like she could trust herself to make that choice. The tension in the room thickened, but this time it felt different. It felt like she was in control, even in her vulnerability, even with him so big, so intense. She could choose to relax, to let him guide her, or she could push back and take a step away from it all. and for the first time, she realized she didn't have to be afraid of the unknown.